sit, then you can talk. And for hearing people, it's beautiful. For deaf people, it's just in the way. So there's a difference between hearing culture. We rely on our eyes for communication. But it's not only that. We get information from our eyes. And we have wider peripheral that we can see from. Hearing people can hear sounds from all around them. Deaf people have a wider range of vision. So if Jesus had kept him right there with the crowd, would the deaf person have been watching Jesus? He'd have been like looking at the crowd. I wonder who's that? Oh, there's that person. Oh, that person. I remember when they were treating me dirty. Oh, yeah. And his eyes would be all over the crowd. He wouldn't be watching Jesus at all. And he wouldn't really know what Jesus was trying to communicate with him. Jesus knew that. Jesus understood deaf culture. Jesus understood this person. And all the people that wanted to see all the great things Jesus was doing, he said, nope, you stay behind, just me and this deaf person. So to know that 2,000 years ago Jesus understood deaf culture like that, that is huge. That's just amazing. Next thing, in verses 32 through 34, I'm going to show them again. He took the deaf person aside. They brought him a deaf person, asked him to lay his hands on them. And he took him away from the crowd, put his fingers in his ears, touched his tongue, spit and touched his tongue, breathed deeply, and said, Ephphatha. So, to that point, Jesus had not used his voice. He said nothing. Why? Because, again, Jesus understands that deaf people aren't going to hear him. So he did things. He did things. Deaf people see what you do. They watch and they grasp it and they know what's happening. So when you put your fingers in his ears, you spit and touch the tongue. Now, maybe in your culture, I don't know, but when I was little, when I would hurt myself, I'd run and fall and skin my knee, and it'd be bleeding. I'd go to my mom, and she'd spit and touch my knee, right? Has anything like that? You have any experience like that? Yeah, so spit is just something for healing, right? And a deaf person would know that. He could understand that immediately. Oh, this is about healing. Putting your fingers in his ears. Oh, my ears, they're going to be fixed. He's Jesus, so yeah, I think I know what's going to happen here. What if he had just talked to the deaf person, tried to talk really loud or something? No, deaf people wouldn't understand that. You've got to show them. They can see what you're doing. And that's just amazing to me that God knew this about us. Take a look at this picture. This is not a deaf church. This is a hearing church. If this was a deaf church, we'd have a big problem. What would that be? Yeah, right. The light coming in from behind. For communication, if we've got light and a person backlit like that, it's really hard to see. You wouldn't be able to understand the sermon. What's he saying? I don't know. Trying to see. It's beautiful. Beautiful for hearing people. It's a delightful feeling. But for a deaf person, it's what is he trying to tell me? We'd lose half the information. Watching for an hour, you might get maybe 30%, 40% because it'd just be too tiring for your eyes. Because, we use our eyes to communicate. So for a deaf church, I'll show you what our deaf church looks like. This is what our church looks like. This is a video. It's not actually playing right now. But that up in the corner is the signer. That's our sign language Bible. Like now, I'm showing you the sign language Bible. I show you a bit, talk a bit, show you a bit, talk a bit. So that's what's happening here. There's one more thing. It's a tiny, tiny little thing, but look and see if you can find something right in front of the pulpit. There's a little orange thing. You see that? You see that light there? What is that? That is, well, like we break up into groups to pray during the worship service. And after we're done with the prayer time, I could call everybody, but that wouldn't make any difference. But I just hit the switch. The light switch goes on. Everybody knows, oh, it's time to stop praying and move to the next piece of our worship service. So hearing churches, deaf churches, they're going to be different. We use different things. Or if there wasn't a flashing light, we could like turn the lights on and off. Or like tap the person, tap, 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 and this person can tap the person next, and the person next. So we do that sometimes too. Different ways of getting people's attention. So in deaf culture, but it's just amazing to me that 2,000 years ago, Jesus was aware of what deaf people need, and he brought the two of them separate. He didn't talk to them. He did things that the deaf person could understand. And when I see that, I think, wow, Jesus, even today, to this day, you are doing things for deaf people, with deaf people, and that is the Sign Language Bible translation. In 1993, we started the Sign Language Bible Translation Project. Mark was instrumental in that. And we started that project, and it's been 30 years now. It's been a long time, but we've been praying, and people have been giving, and we've stayed alive, and we're still working. So thankful. One verse of the things that we've translated is really, and when I was a child, my deaf identity was very, very low. My self-identity was very low. I thought of deafness as can't. Aren't as good as hearing people, can't do all the things hearing people can do, need to kind of hold back and not jump in and do things. But Mark's dad, Mr. Penner, is what I call him, said deaf people can. No, don't say you can't. Deaf people can. And he helped us realize God's love. He showed us God's love. We saw God's love through him. And he didn't just teach us. He was a friend. He was a friend. I could talk to him. I talked to my parents, and it was just, they were just like above me, and they were kind of like teachers, or even talking to my teachers, they were always like above. But when I talked to Mark's dad, it was just, it was like he was on our level. He was showing us the love of God. And that's just, and as I came to know the love of God, that really helped me and my deaf identity. I used to think of sign language as like a negative thing or a bad language, and people would look at us and they'd say, oh, you're just like monkey talk or whatever, like just gesturing. And so I would just like not, try to not sign. Not every deaf person is this way, but there are deaf people that are like really bold, but for me, that was not me. Like they used to slap our hands in school and say, you need to talk, you need to talk, you need to lip read. And so when I was talking to Mark's dad, he's like, no, sign language is great. And so it just really encouraged me to be bold about my identity and signing and just not hold back. And one thing in that whole process that was a big help to me is Exodus 4:10 and 11. This is Moses. Moses, before he goes to Egypt, he's like telling God, no, I can't do this, I can't do this. I am slow of speech, slow of speech and slow of tongue. And even now, since you've talked to me, have I gotten better? No, I haven't. Because I'm heavy of speech and heavy of tongue. No, I can't do this, is what Moses is saying to God. And I was kind of that way. I was like, no, I can't. And God is saying, go. Have courage, go. And I'm like, not so sure. Now when I think back on it, this is a passage that really helped me, this next one. God says, wait, who made man? Who gave you a mouth? Who makes him mute or deaf or seeing or blind? Is it not I, the Lord? And it's like, oh wait, I, Matsumoto, am deaf because God made me this way. I made you deaf. Until now, it's like, oh, my parents, it's their fault that I'm deaf. They were bad. When I got sick and I was 2 years old, I got a high fever, and it's their fault that I'm deaf. They just weren't good enough at taking care of me. If they'd have been more careful, maybe I wouldn't be deaf. And so in my heart, I always kind of criticized them. But now I was like, wait, thank you to my parents, thank you to God that I am deaf. And I appreciate all the difficulties my parents had in raising me. So my heart has changed toward my parents. It's not a critical heart anymore. It's thank you for raising me, thank you for feeding me, thank you for all you did to make me who I am. So like I was saying before, we have a sign language Bible translation, and we've been working on it, but we don't have the whole thing yet. We've still got a long way to go. I'd like to share a little bit about the world situation. There are roughly around 400-ish sign languages in the world, close to 400. That's a lot of sign languages, a lot of different languages. And among all those, there are 81 who have some kind of translation project started. And Japanese Sign Language is one of them, one of those 81. That's because many people have been praying and giving and helping. One person, like I said before, having that strong deaf identity and moving ahead on this, if there was no deaf identity, if sign language is still like that bad, horrible language that doesn't deserve God's word, then we wouldn't have the capacity to work at it and struggle and keep going and keep going and keep going in this process. So in Japan, from Japan we reached out to Asia, and I've been actually in China a while back. I was in China, and at that time it was a persecuted religion, Christianity was, but a person asked me, hey, could you preach to us? I'm like, sure, but then they were like, but we'll have somebody at the door, and there'll be a hearing person. They'll be looking out to see if the police come, sit down right away, sit down. As soon as she signals, you sit down, because it's illegal for you to be preaching. I'm like, oh, okay. I was kind of nervous, like, when are they going to come? My heart was like, I'm preaching, but I'm kind of also watching, and, preach, watch, and it's just kind of, my attention is, finally I'm done preaching, and I sit down. It's like, wow, that was scary. And then I was at another place. It's an apartment, a small apartment, and there were a few people there worshiping, five-ish people. And after the worship service, then we were fellowshipping and talking, and just all of a sudden, there was a big knock at the door, and the door opened, and there were 2 or 3 policemen. I can't remember, 2 or 3, and they were like, came up to me and were like, well, what do they want from me? They would, give me your passport. Like, what? Passport. Oh. So I pulled it out, handed it to them. They looked at it with this scowl, and they looked at me up and down, this awful face. And I'm like, I was so scared. I'm like, what is going to happen to me? And when they were done with the passport, they folded up and gave it to me nicely. No, they just kind of threw it down at me. I'm like, what in the world was that? It was really frightening. And then they left, and it was like, oh, okay. And I remember those experiences. And just the other day, I was getting ready to talk about that, and I was looking at the Joshua 1:9, and we actually have now. It's not in our Bible, but I looked at the rough draft to show it to some people, and well, let's look at it now. This is the rough draft of Joshua 1:9. It's not published yet, but I've told you, be strong, courageous, don't tremble, don't be afraid. Everywhere you go, Yahweh, your God, is with you. But to me, seeing that, it's just a rough draft, but seeing that just was such a strength to my heart to be able to stand firm and be bold and to preach, because God is with me. God is with me. And I looked back at that time in China, and I was so scared. And I'm looking at Joshua 1:9, I'm thinking, maybe if I had that back then, it might not have been so scary preaching. I might have been like a lot more bold and just, God is with me, it's okay. Maybe. Yeah, maybe I wouldn't have been so frightened when the policemen were asking for my passport. So having Joshua, it's in process now, but even just in process, seeing that, man, that made such a difference for me. So the sign language Bible translation really is important. It has an impact. It changes us. Finally, to close with, I'd like to look at one more passage. Oh, the final passage in Mark. And the people were astonished. And they're like, whoa, he does everything so well. So people were saying, oh, how wonderful was what Jesus did. How wonderful. And they were glorifying God. And that's what I want to do today. For Mark coming, for his dad coming and telling me about Jesus, I want to praise Jesus. So, not my name, but I want Jesus' name. I want everyone to realize how great Jesus is. It's like, oh, you did such a great thing. Well, no, Jesus did a great thing. Thank you so, so much for coming and for listening to this. What? Amen.
Yes. Hallelujah. She's going to sign a song from Joshua 1:9.
Joshua 1:9. Be strong. Whoops. That's American sign language. Sorry. Be courageous. Be strong is the song I want to sing. Be strong. Be courageous. You deaf people. God, everywhere you go, is with you. When your enemies attack, you will beat them back. Be strong, be courageous.
Don't
They're going to Arizona for a big meeting, like the international meeting. I'm going to be next going to Thailand, and actually they're going to be in Thailand with me. And then from there to Mongolia. And from Mongolia, then back to Thailand, then from there to Botswana, where there's a new project. And then back home.
Well, the point I want to make is that you used to work with Japanese Sign Language exclusively, right? Translation, correct, Mark?
Yes.
Yes. But the groundwork that's been done there continues even though you're not in Japan right now, with this assistance of Pastor Matsumoto and Wiko, am I right? Oh, is that her name? Wiko, yes. And others like her that have picked up this torch and are carrying it on. But the groundwork that was laid is now being used with another organization that is taking him to Thailand, or he's going to Thailand for, or that is at a conference. But it's to fortify this going to other countries. Mongolians have a deaf population that need to have the Bible translated into their particular language. Botswana, Africa. And so we're seeing something that we've been, our church was supporting the Penners before I was here. And so this work's been going on a long time. And do I understand, Mary Esther, that both your parents were missionaries in Japan, as were Mark's parents? And so there's a long history going on here. Cheryl.
Is Mongolian Sign Language different from Japanese Sign Language, is different from American Sign Language?
Yeah. And I'm interpreting now. He said, yes, like I mentioned before, there's like over 400 different sign languages in the world.
So you personally are multilingual.
So we can communicate and figure out how to communicate with each others. Like when we get together for meetings, we figure out how to adjust our signs. Korimiya has multiple sign languages that she can freely use. But for me, it's not, they're not languages, all of them. But as deaf people, we have one real big advantage, and that is, unlike hearing people, whether they're Christians or not, they use their face and they use space, and face and space are used very similarly across all cultures and across languages. So that helps the words. The signs themselves are different, but face and space are the same. So if it's like one-way communication, it doesn't work. But if it's communicating back and forth, like even when I'm preaching, I'll make sure they're understanding. We'll discuss things. And there's also international sign, a thing called international sign. It's not International Sign Language. Each language is different, but there's a thing that we call International Sign. Yeah, which is IS. It intentionally leaves off the L. So each country has their own sign language. And each one is different. But when we get together, there's a sign language that develops called International Sign, and it's that we can use to communicate with each other. And like she said, with the International Sign, so hearing people always say, "Oh, you should just translate it into International Sign," but that's not the language that people know. That's not their heart language. Yes, that's exactly right. Exactly right.
Are there different dialects within the Japanese culture?
Yes, in the signing, there's like, he's from Tohoku, what the northeast, I'm from the southwest, and our signs are actually quite different. He says water, he says water, I say water. So this is water for me, and for him it's like this. But there is a like standardized Japanese sign language that most people understand.
So, you mentioned that it's hard, it would be, it'd be hard for deaf people, at least initially, to read the language like a Japanese or an English or whatever, because they haven't heard it. But can sign language be used in any of these languages to teach people how to read in the books and things like that that are the written material?
Do you want to answer that? Yeah. Yes, our first language, if we have a first language, a strong first language, then it's easier to learn a second language. But it's a second language. It's not like the language you use every day. But like for me, my first language, so I didn't have a teacher who spoke or used my first language, which is signing. My teachers their language was spoken language, and I would try to find, they didn't know sign language, so I would try to kind of read their lips and figure out what in the world they were saying and try to learn that way, but it was really, really difficult. And for me, Kori, I grew up in a deaf home, signing, so communication was never a problem for me. But so I got my second language. It was a lot easier to learn. So I went to school and got Japanese, and so learned to read and write Japanese. But the people like her who can really understand Japanese well are pretty. They're not that common. Yeah.
Well, I was saying that what they've done has laid the groundwork for you to go to Mongolia. You don't need to speak Mongolian. Isn't that the idea? They're going to take what you've done and apply those principles to translating their own deaf language. Is that correct?
Yeah, for me, I will just help them figure out how to do it better, help them understand the Hearing Bible Society that is running the project, and help the Hearing Bible Society that's running the project understand them, so that all those miscommunications don't get in the way of the project, so that things can run smoothly. So that's some of what I do, and then just helping them get off to a good start. We've made a lot of mistakes in Japan. No need to make those mistakes again. So we can make new mistakes. Yeah.
You're blazing those.
Yeah.
Joyce, speak real loud.
Okay, I didn't quite get the question.
I think the question was, you have a Bible in your own language and you can read that Bible. Is that a yes or a no? Did I ask the right question? Oh, good.
So if you're talking about reading, that would be a Japanese Bible. But that's not our first language. That's the language we had to study to learn. And the way the words work in Japanese are so different. Like in English, you would say the ball hit the cat, or you could say the cat hit the ball. The one little change in word order makes a huge difference. Hearing people hear the ball hit the cat, they know what it means. Deaf people don't. They have to learn the code. If the cat's first, that means this. If the ball's first, that means this. So it can be very confusing to deaf people. And if the sentences get complicated, it's like, forget it. I mean, it's just like, in Japanese, it's even more confusing. So you've got the ball and you've got the cat, but there's all kinds of things you can do to change, like the ball was hit by the cat. Well, the ball's first, but which got hit, right? So it can be really confusing, and it's even more confusing in Japan. So we can understand, we know what ball is, we know what cat is, but who's doing what to whom, like all those, yeah, and especially, yeah, nuances get really confusing.
So specifically about the Bible, not so much reading the Bible.
Yeah, we watch it. Yeah, we watch it. It's just way better. When I prepare a sermon, if it's in Japanese, it's a whole lot different. So I watch the sign language, I can understand it and prepare my sermon much more easily than in Japanese. If it's in Japanese, it's just a lot harder. Japanese is the spoken language. Japanese sign language is the, yeah. So just before I got here, we just finished recording. I just finished recording Romans 1 through 8. And I'm really excited about that because now I have Romans 1 through 8. I can use it to preach. Yeah. And one more thing, is Cody is saying, it's like, let me show you an example. Like, so he gave an example of the ball and the cat and changing the word order. In sign language, if we were to do that, so you could say cat, ball, hit. And you don't have to say who did what. But in sign language, it's a 3D language. So you say the cat, or you put the ball out there, and the ball got thrown and hit the cat. So you see the action happening. So sign language is a language where things happen and you see it. It's not a 2D language where ideas are stuck on a page and put in a certain order to make a certain meaning.
We saw that when she was doing the Charles Atlas stuff, right?
Yeah, they're giving me a big agreement on that one. Yeah, on the sign language. Yeah, it was hard. It was really hard. We changed it and fixed it and fixed it and fixed it and fixed it again. I am so glad to be finished with the signing of that. Yeah. Yeah.
It's like our men's Bible study. Sometimes we only get 2 or 3 verses.
Wow. Yeah. Didn't realize.
You've told a lot of good stories because I've had the benefit, Nancy, and I've had the benefit of spending time with you when you've been here. And I wish they all could hear stories of Rico and how she came to faith working with you, just answering a job opening, if I could make it simple. And she came to faith through it now, and she's a key person in your organization. And talking about someone who had to get hold of the gospel without even really knowing how it plays out. Because they didn't have that, or translated that. I'm sure there's a better way of saying that. But these are just some of the things I've picked up. And one more thing. We were sitting at
34% we do have. We have 34% of the whole Bible
In video is how it's put together, right?
on video. Yeah, like he was showing. That's what he was preaching from. The sign language Bible.
I'm going to have you speak loud.
Okay, so without the scriptures, so we have, my whole life, we've watched Billy Graham present Jesus Christ to people and ask them to come to Christ. Without the scriptures, how would you present Christ to somebody and help them to understand that Christ loves them and forgives them and wants them to come to him? How do you do that?
Well, we've used their second language for a long time, and we've used that to explain, like, okay, this means this means this, this means this. It's kind of like a Japanese lesson, and you can't even get to the spiritual application until first you get through, do you understand what this means? Do you understand this means? Do you understand this? So all the Japanese study gets finished, and then finally you get to, like, oh, now that what it means is, so you explain it in sign language, and so, I mean, you can lead people to Christ, but it just takes so much more effort and longer. Now they can see it for themselves, and it's like, it's not your word saying this is what the Japanese means. It's like, this is the Bible telling me what God is talking to me. So it's different.